Perfect. All right. Let's begin today's seminar. It's my great honor to welcome Igor Molybog. I'm pronouncing it correctly. Igor is an assistant professor at University of Hawai'i at Manoa. He has Ph.D. in engineering from UC Berkeley, and he has also worked as research engineer at Google DeepMind and Meta AI. Igor is excited about developing efficient LLMs and making their evaluation more robust. In addition to that, he's also excited about expanding the AI's impact, identifying novel use cases, and in order to help individuals' productivity. So with that, let's welcome Igor.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for the invitation. It's my pleasure to give this talk.
Just gonna click on this so that doesn't block the screen here.
Cool, awesome. So today I will be talking about several of first of all, I will kind of talk a bit more about myself and what my background is. I will be presenting 3 of the most recent works that have been done within my lab with my students. Kind of the overarching name of the talk is the development and deployment of large-scale AI systems and the tasks they still struggle with. So those are kind of the 3 main things: the development, deployment, and the tasks are the main topics that I will be talking about today. So I will start with some of the work that I was doing throughout my time at Meta, and prior to that, and then I will be switching to the topic of improving the efficiency of data curation. So something that we are going to be talking is the alignment of text models. We will be discussing some of the scaling laws that we have been working on, some of the novel ideas there, and some of the topics that the current multi-modal models are struggling with, which is specifically video synchronization. And there are several ways that we have been developing to kind of solve that challenge. So my background is in applied mathematics and physics. My PhD was in optimization theory, and I came into the world of language from the perspective of scaling. So we in the group Meta AI, we were working towards bringing a large-scale compute to the help of linguistics and language modeling. So it turns out that scaling up pre-training of large models is extremely challenging, and some of the big problems that are still kind of not fully resolved, especially outside of language modeling, is the loss spikes, which is something that prevents training large models, especially as you scale up the compute to thousands of GPUs, and uncovering the mechanisms behind those instabilities from the perspective of stochastic optimization have been in the focus of my research for a while. Throughout the period of Llama the release of the Llama models, I've been working on especially building the distributed training pipelines and efficient architectures. And this is kind of the topic that I'm most excited teaching right now. So my teaching is specifically focusing on building distributed systems that are capable of efficient training of large language models. For the Llama 3 release, I was working on extending the context length and essentially extending context length of transformers more generally at the inference time. So basically, with some fine-tuning or without fine-tuning, extending context length and understanding what is the optimal scheduling of kind of context length over the period of pre-training. What is the effect of switching the context length mid-training, and those kind of questions have been the top of mind for me throughout my work on Llama models. Going forward, I would like to dive deeper into the later stages of training of LLMs, specifically start talking about alignment. Right. So as we all know, the base LLMs, the base pre-trained models are really good at estimating probability that like a specific document belongs to language or belongs to the training data set, but they're not great at actually answering the question. So it's pretty common for the very early LLMs to reply to a question with another question that looks similar or like covers the same topic or like somehow related to the original question. And our goal throughout alignment is to turn LLMs into AI that is actually helpful, right? It could answer the question when we're asked. It can be controlled. It could follow the instructions. It could potentially it could even produce actions in order to like call specific APIs and like turn itself into an agent. There are two independent techniques that are directed at resolving that problem. The first technique is the supervised fine-tuning, which is basically you are learning from examples. You have a bunch of correct examples of a task being performed, and like learning from positive examples is specifically like a good representation of this technique. And the second approach is the approach through contrastive examples. So essentially, you construct a data set of good and bad examples of a task being performed or like an answer being given to a specific question, and you are learning from those preferences, which is done through primarily the RLHF, the DPO techniques, and their variations. In practice, those two independent techniques are combined, and going forward, I will be specifically focusing on the learning from contrastive examples. So how exactly this like contrastive examples are being formed? So for the manual, like essentially, especially for the very early stages of language models, the very first kind of step towards alignment of models is the process of collecting the demonstrations. So basically, a prompt is being sampled from a collection of prompts that is usually predefined, pre-written by humans, and then there is a laborer who is like demonstrates the correct behavior of the model that is expected. So basically, it answers the question or it performs some actions within the API, and the corresponding information is being recorded and then presented to the LLM within the supervised fine-tuning framework. And that's kind of the framework that extensively relies on labeler demonstrations. The main benefit of learning from contrastive examples is that this labeling effort becomes a lot easier. So instead of making a human to like provide a demonstration, we can have a model that is already like have undergone a decent supervised fine-tuning like training stage. We can have that model to generate response options, and then those response options are being scored. So instead of labeling by demonstrating, a labeler is only required to read the responses, which is a lot faster and a lot easier. So that reduces the workload of a labeler and can push the dataset size a lot faster with like a lot more efficiently. If we kind of take a look at the way of essentially labeling this data points, we can try to ourselves essentially score an example of response by a score from 1 to 10. Let's say in this specific singular example, like we can say that someone could say that the score of this specific example essentially the answer to the question of what are the steps for making a simple cake is to like warm the oven and grease a pancake and so forth. If you ask me, I would say that the score of this response is 5. Someone else might have a different opinion of like score of 3 or score of 2. That is like a very big variance of those scores that people are commonly providing to questions like this. And if we are presented with a different example, the score is going to be different. So someone might say that the score of this example is 8. Other people would say that it's 4. And providing as like a straightforward evaluation of a singular example is extremely difficult, even if you have like multiple of them. People are very inconsistent for complex evaluations like this, and this would give a very and extremely noisy learning signal, and therefore people like essentially turned into an alternative method, which is comparing two responses and contextually, essentially picking which of the two responses is better or worse, and therefore providing a clearer signal that is more suitable for learning from. Let's go through the pipeline of creating this kind of a preference data set. So let's imagine that we have a prompt bank that could have artificially been generated for us, or more realistically, it comes from like real case scenarios from real users of a specific system. And a single prompt can be sampled from the prompt base. And usually there is a base language model, or essentially the reference language model that can provide for us the two responses, the response number 1 and response number 2, which are going to be proposed to a judge, which is usually a human, together with a prompt to judge which of these responses is better or worse. This information later propagates into the training data set, which consists of the prompt and the pair of the good and bad responses that could be used further down the line. It's easy to notice that the most expensive part of this entire pipeline is the human judge, right? So essentially, this is like a human judge is something that has to be present within this entire loop. It's extremely difficult to completely eliminate it because some of the signal we kind of have to take from a human. But objectively, there might be a way to kind of reduce the most expensive part of this pipeline. So let me discuss real quick what happens to this training data set further down the line. So the pipeline of direct preference optimization is fairly straightforward. So we can take like a sample from our training data set consisting of the prompt and a good response and a prompt and a bad response, and then we can calculate how likely the current language model that we have, like that is being trained right now, how likely is that model to generate that specific good response, and how likely it is to generate the bad response. So those are going to be the blue and the green values on this demonstration, and then we can have a reference language model that is going to also provide similar estimations of how likely that reference model would have generated those specific good and bad responses. And then we can plug those into the overall objective of essentially comparing the probabilities, right? And we are going to maximize this overall objective in a supervised learning fashion with respect to the current model parameters. That's kind of the overall framework of what happens down the line. Let's take a look at how exactly this pipeline could be modified, and this is where our work comes in, which is essentially, if you boil it down, it's a simple trick to select the response pairs for preference labeling. So we are someone could think about this as a way to do adaptive learning, but it really boils down to a fairly simple trick. So the modification to the data correction process that we are considering here is the following. So let's say that we are starting with the prompt bank, and we are sampling a simple prompt in order for downstream processing. We use base language model in order to generate responses, but this time, instead of just generating 2 responses, we are going to generate several responses. In this case, it's the number of n. And then each of these responses would be fed into this kind of real data processing kind of black box at this point that is going to use our base language model as well, and then resample just a single pair of responses based on their quality. So essentially, you can think about it as picking the best quality of responses through filtering, and then similarly, the two responses are going to be passed into a judge who is going to decide if responses are good or bad, and feed that later into the training data set. So we can see that the main part that is being modified is just the part of filtering responses, and we are really focusing on like, first of all, automated filtering that doesn't really depend on any human annotation, and it has to, therefore it has to be happening before the evaluation step, and it's aiming to provide a good or like essentially a higher quality responses for a downstream labeling, or at least the most useful responses for downstream label. Yes.
Aren't you running the risk that they're going to be too similar? Yeah, well, you said you're going to select the two best.
Well, the word best here is exactly the kind of is exactly the undefined notion here.
Okay.
This is exactly what we are going to be talking about. Yes. So we are going to come up with the best example that is going to be most useful for the downstream training from the perspective of downstream training. So how exactly this filtering could be arranged? So for the decoder on the transformer, I already mentioned that we are using the base language model within our filtering pipeline. So for like a deep decoder on the transformer model, we are relying on the very last layer, basically, that represents the embedding to represent the embedding of a response. So we are relying on the embeddings of the response with our base model. We are taking the very last layer as the components of the very last layer of the neural network, and average across all tokens within the response. So we can think about it as just a single bag of words, but on the side of embeddings, in order to essentially represent every one of the responses that we are going to filter through. And the approach that we do further is so we use this kind of embeddings in order to represent all of the responses within a single space, and we are kind of distincting two different kinds of pairs within our set of possible responses. So there are hard pairs that are represented through similar embeddings, and there are easy pairs that are represented through dissimilar embeddings. And this language comes really from the language of contrastive learning. So that's kind of essentially the hard pairs are the hard pair of responses are the responses that are really close together. And in contrastive learning, intuitively, usually you actually want your contrastive examples to be fairly close together. The easy pair is like a pair of responses that is very easy to distinguish between, and therefore they are represented as dissimilar embeddings. And as a baseline, the default option that we have is we are just selecting a random pair, right? So we at the core we are comparing these three different ways of selecting response pairs after throughout the filtering process. So we are kind of asking the fundamental question that we ask here is it useful for contrastive learning of language models to use hard pairs? Does it make sense? Does this question make sense? I'm just curious if there are any questions at this point. Yes.
So I would think that the value of a hard pair might depend on whether it was hard and good versus hard and bad. So my analogy here is giving me the intuition is a multi-arm bandit where eventually you'll zero in on the two best arms and pull them a lot to figure out which one is better. You don't really care about 49th versus 50th place.
Yeah, that's a very good way to think about this. Unfortunately, at this point, we don't really understand like this is not a way like we don't really have the signal of which preference would be taken down the line. So it's very difficult for us to kind of understand this. But I think that your intuition is very correct here. It would definitely depend on the overall like quality, and like we are working with specific data sets of like I would say average quality of pairs. So we are working with examples from basically responses on social media, on like Reddit, like the responses to the questions. And I would say that the average quality of those responses is not the best, but it's like I would say that it's like average for what humans are usually working with.
And so from your answer, it sounds like you are not yet doing this online. You've got two phases, one where you collect the data, and so you don't actually have any preference signal. You don't have any preference model yet.
You might
collect all the data first. Sorry, you generate first, then you collect all the data, then you train the preference model.
Exactly.
You don't know whether you're comparing hard to good versus hard to bad.
Exactly. Yes. So this is this problem setting is for the cases when you don't have a good preference model yet. So there might be like essentially there are very good preference models right now, for example, for harmful responses or for helpful responses, but there are like aspects for which the preference model is not ready yet, and for those specific cases is where we are kind of developing this method for.
Right, but in future you might be able to do this online, I guess, where you collected your first 10 pairs and then you start to get a sense of
which one. Yes, exactly. Yes, that's correct. So for does anyone has any other ideas of which one of the pairs would be most useful, like hard or easy? Yep.
So here you're using like if the two labels are similar, I think they are hard to distinguish between which one is better, which one is not. So you can take other metrics of similarity here. Is that possible to just use like inference similarity? So for example, if two responses have a lot of indirect overlap, you can also say that it is hard to distinguish between the two.
Absolutely, yes. We actually have experimented with several types of metrics, and especially we were looking at distinguishing using different models, so different ways to like construct embeddings and then compute the similarity matrices. And it turned out that actually leveraging the base model that you are actively training is providing you with the useful signal, whether any other way to construct this kind of embeddings or this kind of like separation or distance matrices wouldn't work as well. Like it turns out that like like essentially the way that we explain this is you are asking which pairs of responses are difficult to distinguish for this model specifically. So it's not like which pairs of responses are difficult in general or like similar in general, but conditioned on this model that that is being trained right now.
Thank you very much. But following up on that, you can also use if you use the base model, you can like aside from using the embedding, you can also use the mock probabilities of the base model. In this case, the reference model. Say if the two responses have similar mock probabilities, you can also say they are hard to distinguish. Conditioning on the base model.
Exactly. I mean, this is pretty much what we are using. So we are using the very last layer, which is basically the layer that contains the information about the probability. And well, the way that we are we eventually we need to average it somehow. We need to bring it down to a specific like a vector representation within a finite dimensional vector, and therefore we use just like averaging over all tokens. But fundamentally, we are using a layer that already contains the information about the probability distribution, and like the probability distribution over the vocabulary. Yes.
These embeddings that you use are pre the language model head.
Yes.
So it's just the last layer.
Right. Any other questions? Yes.
So, were you still looking for an answer to your question about whether parity is zero or hard?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So, there's a thing that you're talking about here from perspective of discrimination. This is if you're able to, let's suppose everything has an underlying true score, which is like the rewarded DPO or something. Then the ones that are close together would probably be better. But that's also exactly the case where the humans will be more noisy and also will take longer to answer.
Amazing. Yeah, this is exactly the point that we are trying to answer, is like which one is more impacting more. Like, is it more valuable to bring it examples that are close together for the learning perspective, or is it more valuable to like extract the information from the signal from the humans during the judgment phase? And let's try to answer this question. So to put this into perspective, this is kind of how the entire workflow looks here. So we are starting with a prompt. We are using the base LLM to sample several examples. Then we pass it into real that is basically separating into easy and hard pairs. And then the specific pair is going through the DPO process and is being used to train the reference LLM. In the end, essentially, like what we have observed like pretty consistently throughout our experiments is that easy pairs are in fact more useful for the downstream training of the downstream alignment of language models. We have tried it for the examples of different families and found that like if compare it using margins or the human alignment scores or the alignment with the AI judge, we use GPT-4 more specifically. The model that was trained on the easy pairs comes on top pretty consistently. The model that was trained on random pairs, so basically the baseline is the next best, and the model trained on the hard pairs is the least performant one, and the difference there is quite considerable. Trying to understand the reason behind it is essentially like our first guess was what Jason mentioned, and this is what we ended up building our experiments around. So we were trying to understand if the data label within a specific subset that was chosen by a specific model is better, is basically well aligned or not aligned with a label that GPT-4 would be making. And it turns out that in fact the labeling essentially the subset that was corresponding to the easy pair was consistently more aligned with GPT-4 labels than random or the data set that was generated from the hard examples. Therefore, we make the conclusion that it's actually a lot more important to extract information from the humans and the correct signal from the humans, and make sure that the examples that you give to the humans are kind of distant enough and different enough for you to actually be able make sure that there are less mistakes in the judgment down the line. It's much more important than trying to select hard pairs for the downstream training. And this actually is very much in line what we have observed throughout alignment of Llama 3 models. And but the way that training was done there is slightly different, because it the downstream alignment procedure was based on examples that were distinct based on the downstream labeling. Essentially, the labelers told us which distinctions they are confident about and which one they are not. But the idea is pretty much similar, that you make sure that you only include into training the examples that you are absolutely certain that they have like distinction, and they contain enough of a secure information and secure signal within them. Thank you very much. Are there any questions about this approach? Yes. You mean the essentially like anything in between? Yeah. Well, that's a great question. It's actually possible to construct a better example. That's something that I actually don't mention in the talk, but it's something that is included in the paper. We actually experimented with several more ways to like construct those pairs. One of them was called a centroid pair. You are clustering all of your responses into two clusters, and then you pick the most representative examples from both of them, and that kind of balances out. And the performance of that method is actually higher than even the performance of the easy method. So essentially, balancing out the difficulty of pairs could work even better, and we do write about this in the paper. But thank you for the question. That's great. Any other questions? Awesome. So the next kind of topic that I wanted to cover today is the topic of constructing scaling laws. So scaling law, generally speaking, is an analytical expression that connects the hyperparameters of an LLM. Most commonly, it's the size of the LLM and the number of data points to the downstream performance metrics. Most commonly, the perplexity of the cross entropy, the very fundamental metrics. And the question that we are asking within this project is: are these scaling laws? Are there any scaling laws for multi-LLM AI systems? And the primary multi-LLM AI system that we are look at is the speculative decoding system. Just to remind you what speculative decoding is essentially a way to improve the throughput of like LLM inference, where you have a system of two models. One is like a big model or something that's more powerful. It's called the target model, and the other model is the draft model, which is usually something that you have a very cheap way to sample from. So something that's a lot probably a lot smaller. So here we are going to denote the size of the draft model as n, and the size of the target model as m, and they correspond to different distributions fundamentally. So the draft model is the distribution is q, and the target model distribution is p, and the speculative decoding is kind of a way to actually sample from the distribution of p using the draft sampling or the Q distribution as a subroutine, essentially. So we are it proceeds like the following. We use the efficient model to generate gamma, which is the look ahead length completions of our sentence, and then we evaluate all of those completions within one go with our target model representing the distribution P. And the target model can accept or reject tokens based on a threshold rule. And we can like the kind of the core parameters that are characterizing this process is the beta, which is the probability of accepting a specific, basically the next token that comes from our distribution Q given a specific context, and alpha, which is the kind of a characteristic of a value that actually characterizes the interplay between the models in a very concise manner, which is basically the expected number of tokens that is going to be accepted irrespective of a context. So essentially, for averaging across all of the contexts, it's a probability of accepting a specific token, and a very easy expression that can govern the throughput of such a speculative decoder system is written right here. It as you can see, it has three or four of the most important components. First of all, there's alpha, which is again just characterizing the interplay between the probability distributions. gamma, which is the look-ahead length, and C, which is the ratio between the sizes of the models, or essentially the cost of inference from the draft and the target model. The follow-up papers have been studying the essence of throughput, and they have also came up with a few other notions. The TAR, which is essentially a function of gamma, which specifically tells us how many tokens on average the target model is going to accept that among those tokens that are generated by the draft model. And the throughput in this case could be expressed as even an easier expression through the TAR. In this case, our basically the latency or the workload of inferencing from the target and the draft model are going to be approximated as the 2 times the number of parameters flops. So in our case, the throughput is being measured as not as tokens per second, but as token per flop. So essentially, this is like a metric that connects the number of tokens that's being processed by a single kind of machine within a specific point of time. And the paper called Decoding Psychological Decoding was the very first one that actually noticed that the TAR value, the average number of tokens that is being accepted by the target model is actually correlated with the accuracy of the draft model. So we wanted to study this more rigorously and see if there is like a specific law that we can understand and use potentially in order to better predict the throughput of a speculative decoding system like this. So the very first step that we took is essentially eliminating the gamma. You can easily express the throughput as an expression that connects just gamma, alpha, m, and n, and essentially optimize with respect to gamma, and actually obtain a closed form expression for gamma that you can use down the line in order to obtain an expression for throughput through just alpha, m, and n. And the next step for us was to understand better the properties of this alpha, of this cornerstone parameter that characterizes the interplay between different distributions. We have studied various models, and we have conducted experiments over different families of models, and I figured out that first of all, the dependency on the target model perplexity of alpha is sort of weak, and while the dependency of alpha on the target model on the draft model perplexity is very pronounced. So we are modeling our value of alpha as a value that depends primarily on the perplexity of the draft model, and then we switch to the actually choosing the scaling law. We are going through several different options, including power law, logarithmic, linear, exponential, sigmoid options, and figured out that actually logarithmic scaling law would work the best in this situation across pretty much all of the models that we have tried. It can be expressed as the following. So our alpha is some constant a plus b times the logarithm of perplexity, which is kind of natural in this situation. After choosing the scaling law, we can actually leverage it in order to further express the throughput through perplexity of the draft model. At the same time, basically, we know that throughput basically does not depend directly on the perplexity of the target model, given a specific size and a specific size of the data set that the model is being trained on. After obtaining the expression for throughput through perplexity, we can further leverage the existing scaling laws connecting the perplexity of the models to their cornerstone parameters, such as the size of the data set and the size of the model that the draft model, essentially the size of the draft model and the number of training tokens that it has been trained on, in order to finally kind of obtain the expression for the throughput, optimize it with respect to the size of the draft model, and come up with a kind of a simple relationship connecting the size of the optimal draft model to the to the size of the optimal target model. So like this is being done in order to understand better what is the kind of strategic decisions that people have to make whenever they are like training let's say families of large language models, which kind of reasonable pairs they have to come up with in order to make sure that they are matching in like within this speculative decoding system. And yes, is that a question?
So sorry, I think I lost you somewhere. We are trying to identify the size of the draft model, the optimal size of the draft model, such that you're maximizing the throughput of the overall speculative decoding.
Exactly.
But probably we are not just optimizing throughput, right? Because if I were to just optimize throughput, I would just use the smallest. Well, actually, I cannot use the smallest draft model because that way I will need to do a lot more verification.
Exactly. Yes. So as we will see over here, the kind of next step is to actually like materialize this scaling law in the very middle of the slide. We are considering several options because, well, many different models have different different scaling laws, and we are showing that pretty much any one of them would work more or less the same. But here we are assuming that chinchilla scaling law that was developed by Google like several years ago, and we are using that in order to kind of express the dependency between the throughput and the draft model size that we obtain, and you can see that it actually is like an arc that has a small tail in on the very right side. That's where the size of the draft model is approaching the size of the target model, and basically you stop actually using a draft model as a draft model. Like at that point, those models are essentially the same, and you can generate tokens from the draft models, and they will be coming from like exactly the same from the exact same distribution as the target model. So there is, as you can see, there is a trade-off. You don't want your model to be extremely small because that will result in very small alignment between the distributions, between the P and the Q distributions. So the value of alpha is going to be extremely small. On the other hand, you don't want the draft model to be extremely large. That would result in an extremely costly drafting of the tokens, and therefore and you can actually characterize this trade-off through this kind of simple scaling law that you can see on the right top of the slide. So basically here we first of all, out of all of the options that we have been choosing from, we have figured out that the dependency on the size of the training data set is extremely weak. We don't have to consider it, and the relationship between the size of the optimal draft model and the size of the target model is fairly straightforward. So basically, you can say that the size of the draft of the optimal draft model is approximately two order of magnitude smaller than the target model that you are dealing with, and this also essentially holds if you are using different options for the scaling laws. So we also have constructed our own versions of the scaling laws for the OPT and the Pythia models that resulted in essentially an extremely similar result that you can see on the top right corner. So this kind of general rule of thumb is that the optimal size of the draft model has to be approximately 2 orders of magnitude smaller than the target. The optimal size of the draft is two orders of magnitude smaller than the target. Yes, are there any questions?
So your theoretical predictions about where the optimal size is, might not quite match the reality. Did you see some mismatches, like where you predicted something, but the optimal point in practice was actually off?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the previous paper that I mentioned, the decoding, speculative decoding, they were conducting similar research, but they were conducting that primarily experimentally, and they have figured out exactly the same thing. Like, by basically our predictions matching their experimental result pretty, like, fairly well, I would say. So like like at least for the biggest models, like they were considering the OPT 66 billion and Llama 65 billion. For those models, our predictions are almost exact. So I would say that the experiment, the predictions of this theory are fairly well confirmed in practice, right? Any other questions? Yes.
You have to assume like all the graph model are from the same model family as the target model.
That's a great question. So over here we actually experimented with a lot of a lot of different families here. So we can see that our primary draft models are OPT and Pythia, and our target models are actually OPT, Pythia, Llama, and even Gemma. So to understand better if our conclusions would work for models that are already fine-tuned, like aligned, we also consider Gemma. But like, obviously, like, we would prefer to consider larger models as well. But at this point, it's not necessarily the case that your draft models and target model are from the same from the exact same family. But apparently, it's a lot easier to kind of make this prediction if it's the case. So, for example, here the quality of prediction for the Gemma is like something to the power of -6, while for the Pythia, for example, it's a lot higher. So I would say that the scaling law would be more accurate if you were to kind of consider the same draft models from the same family. But the overall idea of like constructing a scaling law, I would say that it's possible to exploit even outside of this.
I have a big follow-up.
Yep.
Suppose you have a model that is similar to your predicted optimal size for the draft model, but it's of a all-time similar to the target model.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have another model that is, say, like same family with less similar to the optimal size. Do you have any evidence for
I would say that yeah, that's a good question. So this is exactly the kind of trade-off that would be captured by this value of alpha. I'm not sure what would be the exact behavior based on your description, but I would say that it's possible to analyze this case within the framework that you represent. Any other questions? Okay, so cool. So some of the open questions. First of all, verifying this at a much larger scale is something that would be extremely interesting and important. We have a shortage of computational resources at Manoa, unfortunately. But other questions that you might ask is: does this hold for tool using models? Does this hold for reasoning versions of speculative decoding? There was a reasoning version released like a couple of weeks ago. And does this hold across modalities? So like speculative decoding for multi-modal models is something that could potentially work out. And essentially, like, using the same framework, you could analyze like more modern versions of speculative decoding tools, such as like Medusa and other like self-speculative decoding. They all kind of fall within the same framework, and this value of alpha could be characterizing like all of them. And I would say that this kind of approach could be applied to those cases as well. Okay, so moving forward, I would like to spend the last 8 minutes on the topic of video synchronization. And the core question that we ask here is: can VLMs, the visual language models, synchronize videos? Who thinks that they can?
What do you mean by synchronization?
Like you give it two two videos. You say there are two sequences of frames from video 1 and video 2. You give both sequences to capture the same events. You're saying that you can predict a like positive and a negative offset within like a specific specific range, and then you just present the frame sequences. So it turns out that the VLMs are terrible at this, and the average error of VLMs is 15, basically the same as the guess of 0. And we wanted to kind of contribute to this by first of all developing a good enough benchmark, and second, like essentially developing at least like a baseline approach that's not necessarily VLM, that VLM can be compared against. So the traditional video synchronization, yes, is there a question?
Yeah, could you just go back? So I would expect the model to do badly in the following circumstance, where I augmented the training data set with sped up and slowed down versions of the videos. And I wonder if there's some natural variation in speed. Like you're trying, the car is here versus the car is here, and you want to know how many frames it is. And that depends on knowing the frame rate and the speed of the car. And I wonder whether the baseline model would do better if you gave it another pair of frames from the same video and said how far apart they were. Or you instead of giving it frames 1 and 2, you give it 0, 1, and 2. So 0 and 1, were 20 frames apart. So now 1 and 2, how far apart are those?
Yeah,
So the problem with the task might just be too hard.
yes, yeah, I would say that that's a fair point, and I would say that that's like that's I would say that formulation of a task would also be extremely interesting and reasonable. I'm not sure which one is more difficult. Unfortunately, we only studied this formulation in this specific work, but I think that would be very interesting follow up too.
I mean, do you think that putting an additional interval in with supervision would actually make it easier, or it's just kind of like the structure of the VLMs is not good?
I don't think that the structure is necessarily not good. It's I don't think that VLMs are commonly exposed to data like this, and your examples are definitely like a very good, would be a very good addition. I would say that I'm not sure, like it would be interesting for me to give examples like this to a VLM and then compare it on our new benchmark of like how much better that, like how much of a difference that would make. That's
so another way of coming at this. I said that maybe the problem is just too hard. Can humans do it?
Humans are doing it. It's like a job, basically. So it's essentially
That's right. Can they do it in a case where they just see
So it's like initially our
I actually misunderstood this. I'm sorry. My question is somewhat moot. I thought it was just two images and it's two frames and it's two sequences.
Yeah.
Of frames.
Yes.
You actually can estimate the speed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, in that case, I should just withdraw the question.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So it's like in practice, there are like a lot of folks are basically coming up with like you can imagine yourself within like Adobe Premiere or something, and you have like several video clips of like wedding, and then you need to synchronize them. So the traditional way to solve this problem is to rely on audio signal. So that's kind of something that people have done extremely well by now. The traditional ways to do it either rely on audio cues or on explicit visual markers, such as like the clipping of the device on the stage or flashing lights or stuff like this. However, these traditional methods are not very applicable to a lot of other things, sport analysis, surveillance cameras, anything that does not record audio or is not like a preset kind of scene. And the most important application of this is the autonomous systems. Like obviously, we want robots with many cameras. Those cameras not necessarily are easy to synchronize on like the device level, and we really want to understand better how to do this on the video frame level. So we present this video sync framework that is like extremely intuitive. You have two sequences of frames that you fit into an embedding model. and you are end up with the similarity matrix in one way or another. Most realistically, the similarity matrix is a cosine similarity matrix between the two embeddings, and then you feed that similarity matrix to a classifier in order to predict the output of the essentially the offset between the two sequences of frames, how much apart they actually are.
And this is trained and so the embedding learns to keep the features that determine whether it's the same.
Exactly. Yes. So yeah, basically, like we are using embedding models that were like pre-developed, and essentially we see that there's like certain biases that you want the model to have. At least like it needs to be able to represent the same scene from different perspectives in a very effective way. Like you need to make sure that it can capture the 3D kind of structure of the scene in order to be kind of good at this problem. So the state of the art technique is the SessionNet, which is the video the video anchored synchronization procedure. The essence of it is the embedding model is constructed in the way that you are extracting the position of a human. You represent it as a like essentially a carcasses, and you are taking the positions of the nodes within the carcasses in order to extract the features of a specific frame. So you are basically making the model to construct an efficient representation of the 3D structure, but in a very explicit form by using the position of a human. Obviously, this is not very generalizable because it uses a human, and we want to kind of generalize this framework in order to consider more generic videos within this framework. Looking at the classifiers, there are several types of the classifiers that you can think about. Here on this specific slide, you can see that this similarity matrix. The highlighted positions are the positions of the maximum. So the classifier that was used within the SysNet is the classifier, the so-called argmax classifier that takes the argmax from every single row of the similarity matrix, subtracts the row index, and essentially gets like a table from which, if you take the argmax out of this table, you will get like a median. Essentially, you will obtain the value of the offset that is close to being optimal. So basically, you have a specific line along which you would expect the maximum the maximum values of the similarities to like cluster around. That's the expectation out of it. So the first thing that we have figured out is that it's extremely important to make sure that the pre-processing is being done correctly. So the SessionNet approach was to cut off takes two video pieces that are synchronized, cut off the first part of the video, and then essentially ask how much of the video was cut off. On the right hand side, you can see the blue line represents the correct offset. So you would expect all of the red dots that correspond to the maximum values to line up along the blue line, but this is not what's happening. You can see that there is a lot of noise. Where that noise is coming from? Well, the fact is that we are actually trying to synchronize two random signals here. So this picture represents a completely random signal. So you should not expect any kind of structure within this picture, and yet the SessionNet figures out how to essentially line up the end of the recording exactly according to the blue line, and that kind of introduces a very tough bias, and essentially this makes the SessionNet just because your end positions of the video are synchronized, you are introducing bias, and the SessionNet is basically based on their positional embedding is capable of just guessing the correct offset correctly. The first thing that we did is we did reprocessing of the videos, making sure that we are cropping both the beginning and the end of the video and making it infeasible to just guess the correct answer. We can see that the performance of the SessionNet on real data drops dramatically right away after we have done the reprocessing. And another kind of way to illustrate the problems with the preprocessing is that if you are if you are doing the preprocessing correctly, then synchronizing longer videos is actually a lot more like a lot easier. So the absolute frame error is expected to drop as you increase the number of video frames. For the SysNet, it's the other way around. So basically, as you decrease the number of frames, the kind of noise takes over, and the quality of the synchronization falls dramatically. So let's say that we understand now how we are supposed to do pre-processing for this task. Now we consider several options for the embedding model. There is an embedding model that is called CARL. Essentially, it's a self-supervised approach to solve a video alignment problem. There is also like much more common models that are used in VLMs right now, such as internal video and video MIE. Comparing those video synchronization approaches, turns out that first of all, the CARL approach introduces inductive bias that is suitable for synchronization, because of the way it's essentially it's trained, the self-supervised way that it's trained. And the CNN-based classification of similarity matrices brings the best result, which is kind of expected because you are working on top of matrix of similarities, and the convolution of the neural networks turned out to work out great. We are like within this paper, we are presenting several new benchmarks. So besides the data sets that contain humans, such as NTU and CMU data sets, we are also presenting a benchmark containing multiple humans and like no humans at all, such as the Puring data set that we have cleaned and prepared for downstream evaluation that could be easily done like within our benchmark framework. You can see that Puring data set is something that the baseline models that we develop are better with. However, the multi-human data set is still very far from being saturated in a way. So to sum up the results of the specific push is that there is a relatively new task that the current VLMs fail in. We have developed a diverse benchmark in order to measure the performance of different approaches. We have developed a general framework to kind of attack this problem from the baseline perspective, and developed a classic ML baseline method that performs fairly well within this area, so that VLMs can be compared against that. Are there any questions right now about the synchronization? Okay, so to sum up, I want to kind of go over quickly what we have been discussing today. So first of all, we looked at the pipelines that require data with different properties, and we have figured out that generating high quality data is very hard and expensive, and simple tricks can actually reduce the amount of data that is necessary for specifically training from preference data sets. We understood that prediction driven design of LLM inference systems could potentially save research effort and experimentation, and that there are tasks that are trivial for humans that AI still is struggling with, and we need to kind of work on them in order to make sure that it can automate those tedious tasks for us. Thank you very much for your attention. I would be happy to take any questions.
Yeah, I have a question about the video synchronization task.
Yep.
What is one expecting to do after synchronizing the video? Let's see what I mean by that. Okay, if your goal was something like trying to do 3D from stereo, then you'd have to be right down at the frame level. One frame off just messes up everything. But for others, I don't know how much matters. So what is the intended application here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the intended application that we had in mind was essentially in robotics, and making for developing precision sensing devices, specifically for cameras that are essentially sensing the scene in real time within a robot. It's extremely important for the video streams to be synchronized down to like the frame level in order to make sure that the cognition is correct. So there is like a lab within the EE department that we work with that work on a computational imaging, pretty much, and they are trying to create like depth perception cameras, and for those kind of applications, it's extremely important to make sure that the cameras, like no matter where they are, have like extremely like precise synchronization. And sometimes like their use case that they were thinking about was putting cameras on drones. So like several different drones can perceive the same area from different perspectives, and they need a way to synchronize them either online or like down on the server in order to kind of create an efficient inference, like in order to understand the scene more efficiently. This is kind of the initial application that we had in mind for this purpose. Yeah.
Isn't that hard actually to fix it on device in settings like that? I mean, if they're designed to work together, then they just have to do a couple rounds of communication asynchronous clocks.
Absolutely. The thing is, it's not like usually this requires a separate effort from the hardware perspective, and also like the kind of application they were thinking about. They were thinking about like essentially like a fleet of multiple drones that can synchronize ad hoc, and for that, like implementing a system that would do synchronization on the hardware level, it just presents like a lot of difficulties. It's pretty hard to implement, and synchronizing offline back on the server presented them with a better opportunity, I would say.
I've worked with people who do this once in a while, and one of the things you do is instead of solving this hard problem, you could do something like have one of the drones like emit a flash of light every couple of seconds, sufficiently bright that the others see it. That becomes your signal. Other things you've done is when we control the environment, we were doing this. You could just put a very high speed, like a sports clock, like for 100 meter racing. Just put that in the field of view, and all the cameras see it. And then you can synchronize.
Yeah, absolutely. If you present robots to like a controlled environment, that's absolutely feasible. However, it's like in practice, your drones are as small as possible. They probably don't want to carry light everywhere around, and also they probably are looking at a field of view that is not supposed to be looked at. It could be, for example, a scene of a natural disaster, and in this case, it's difficult to find a clock that would be like.
Yeah, I don't think you could have other means of solving.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't say that it's like the unique potential solution. I would say that this is the most versatile solution to approach this problem in an environment that's not as controllable.
And how much information do you have about the relative geometry of the camera? Because that can be another thing that helps, because then you can use registration. So
yeah, that's a very good point. I don't think that we quite address this within our current benchmark. We have we essentially all of the videos that are captured within the benchmark are captured with the identical cameras first of all, and the field of view is extremely similar. But it would be interesting to take that into consideration as well. Any other questions?
Thanks, speaker.
Thank you. Thank you very much.